Hello, everyone. Come on into our pad here at She Said, She Said. We're so excited today to be kicking off our first 2021 theme show. This year, She Said is going to let the sunshine in on those mellow make love, not war days of the late 1960s when hippies roamed the land, the Grateful Dead performed for flower children in Haight-Ashbury's Park, and the Beatles taught us that all you need is love. So for the next 9 months, we're going to be taking you on a magical mystery tour through those colorful days and introducing you to some of the people who made it all happen. I am your co-host, Lena Stagg, the culinary chef and author of the Recipe Records series of rock and roll cookbooks. And in my 4 volumes filled with recipes, rock music history, music trivia, and fun, there are plenty of recipes to celebrate that laid back and creative time from 1967 to 1970. In the first volume, simply entitled Recipe Records, you can slip into the mood of 1967 with one of my favorite brunch recipes, I Am the Eggs Man. Then my Recipe Records 60s edition gives you chocolate lovers a chance to walk on the wild side with incense and peppermint bark. It's so easy to make and so good. Then in Recipe Records, a culinary tribute to the Beatles. You can sip a little Get Back Joe spiced coffee with a yummy slice of apple scruff cake. And last but not least, in my latest book, The Rolling Scones, Let's Spend the Bite Together, I'll take you down to those hazy days of the late 60s with some shaken, not stirred, Ruby Tuesday martinis. Each and every Recipe Records book provides you with a very groovy list of songs that you can play as you cook, songs designed to whisk you right back to that era where everyone was going to San Francisco and we all had flowers in our hair. So check out the Recipe Records series and also my children's books at lenastagg.com.
I highly endorse them. They will, oh my gosh, the recipes are so good. Hey guys, it's Jude Sutherland Kessler, Lena's trusty sidekick and author of the historical narrative series that takes you on that journey through John Lennon's life and times with his mates, the Beatles, and with our guest today. It's called the John Lennon series. As Lena just said, we are thrilled to have everybody here for our very first psychedelic Beatles show of 2021. We've had a couple of other shows this year. We were finishing up our series on the Beatles family, and we're so thrilled to have Julia Baird with us 2 months ago. And it was just one of the highlights of our life, to be sure. And we have also had one of our famous eye candy shows. And today is kind of a combination of our hashtag eye candy shows and our first psychedelic show, because our guest today is definitely hashtag eye candy, innovative, interesting, and really someone that you're going to want to meet. Now, you got to know that Lena and I are decked out in our ultra bell bottoms. We've got on our sugar and ice white lipstick and our paisley face paint, because as we're sipping our ice cold Frescas and eating our salty Charles chips, and if you know what I'm talking about, you definitely lived through the 60s. We're going to go back in time and we're going to make those days of the psychedelic Beatles come to life today. But before we do, I want to just tell you very quickly that if you have been waiting for volume 5 in the John Lennon series, Shades of Life, you might want to listen to Joe Johnson's Beatle Brunch coming up the weekend of June 5th and 6th. That's coming up in a week, because there is a big announcement. And if you can't wait until then, you might take a peek at the John Lennon series website. So we are looking forward to a fun and fab update in just a few days. Right, Lena?
Yes, we are. So be sure you go to johnlennonseries.com. You will not be disappointed, I promise. So, yes, Jude and I are in a very celebratory mood today, and not just about our book projects, but because we have with us today one of the key players in the Beatles story, a man who was a fixture in the Apple headquarters and who was with the Beatles day in and day out during the psychedelic era, and who even devised the look that the Beatles adopted when they shed their early Beatles image.
That's right. It was all down to him, and he's going to talk about that. He was really good friends with Sir Paul, and he was there during the early days when Yoko came on board and really got to see the inside workings of Apple. And he came to know all of the Beatles through, well, we'll let him tell you. But the Beatles had great respect for him because as an accomplished stylist and an artist from the Vidal Sassoon school, he truly created the look that made swinging London so mod and so singular. He has a wonderful book out that's called The Cutting Edge that you all have to read because it tells the very unique and interesting story about the Beatles. And let me tell you something, after having read 500 plus books on the Beatles, I almost opened the cover of a book with dread because I know I'm going to hear the same old stories. They may be told a slightly different way, but it's the same stuff over and over again. I did not know the stories in this book. They were completely unique, and it's one of the few insider glimpses into the world of the Beatles from a person who is really there from almost the beginning all the way to the very end. And on top of that, it is not a tell-all book. Our guest today treats the Beatles with great respect and with great integrity. So Lena and I are extremely honored to welcome to She Said, She Said, the one and only Leslie Cavendish. Hey, Leslie.
Hey, Jude. Hey, Lena. Thank you very much. Hope you're both well. It's afternoon for you and evening for me, but
you're right.
Well,
we are very, very grateful that you are joining us here on She Said, She Said. Our listeners are going to adore listening to you for first of all, but also hearing about your excellent adventures through that you've shared in your book, The Cutting Edge. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love in the book, you refer to yourself in one chapter, just very briefly, as perhaps you were the inspiration for Billy Shears.
Yes, you could interpret it, but the other people have said that, but it's a nice story.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We love it. So Leslie, set the stage for us, if you will. You're 15 years old and you have great dreams of becoming something really great, being the best of the best. And I know you were interested in girls. And so it sort of led you to the salon of Vidal Sassoon. And tell the listeners about what it was like to get accepted into his school and how you applied. And that's a funny story. It's a great story. Share that with our listeners.
I will indeed. It's you're right. I did like girls and I liked football. And I wasn't very good at art and I wasn't very good at making things, but I wanted to be a footballer. That's how it started. But to sort of move on to 15 years old, when you left school in England, if you wanted to and not study, I went to pick my mother up at a hairdresser salon not far from where we used to live in North London. And I did see a great big American car outside this place, which was called Burnt Oak, which is not the sort of Hollywood Boulevard type of place. It was a North London suburb. I saw this American car there. I walked in just going to take my mum home. I sat down and there was this guy, blonde hair. And I think it was his wife who he had a salon with, 3 other women stylists. And I was the only guy in there, just sitting there. And I'm watching him finish my mum's hair. And I suddenly thought, what a nice way to go to work. You know, you wake up, you go into work and you're surrounded by lovely ladies. And not only that, you're just creating a hairstyle for them and they're letting you do it. So the trust is between the hairdresser and the client. I thought it was quite fascinating. One of my best friends who left school at the same time, we still are good friends, I asked him what he was doing because he should have been a footballer. He said, Leslie, I'm going into hairdressing. I said, oh, I wonder why. And we both looked at each other. And I thought, right, okay, he's on the same wavelength. We're both on the same wavelength. So I thought I was going to go and join him at his salon, which was in Baker Street, if anyone knows part of London. And he said, no, don't come here. He said, there's a guy that's really, we're copying him, a guy called Vidal Sassoon. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know if that was a hairstyle or not. I didn't know what it was. Strange name to have. Anyway, I went home, and my mum's sister was living with us with her two children while she was getting divorced. And I happened to say, Mum, I've got this appointment for Vidal Sassoon. And the moment I said it, my aunt turned around and said, oh, when you go there, give Vidal my love. So I said, well, where do you know him from? And she said, well, I used to go to the clubs in the East End of London. I said, really? I said, it's amazing. And she said, yeah, he's an East End boy. I said, what, with a name like Vidal Sassoon? She said, yeah, he's Portuguese and that kept his name. So I made this appointment. On thinking, on the day or just a few days before, I thought, oh my God, I'm hopeless at art, I'm hopeless at drawing. What do I do? What do I do to show that I'm in control? I know what I'm doing. And I made this wooden bowl at school, which was my proud possession, because it was done on this lathe. And the teacher said, you'll never be any good at it. And he's right. But it was a wobbly wooden bowl. So I thought, I know, I'll take that up. So I put it in a plastic bag. And if you know London, I got out at Bond Street station. You go down Bond Street, which is where Jude and Lena, you would be memorized down there. Your eyes would pop out with the jewelry, the clothes, everything. It's a very chic place. And I worked my way down to number 171 New Bond Street, right in between the Queen's Jewelers, Asprey's, right next to Gucci, right next to Cartier. I mean, you can't get better than that. All it was this great big floor-to-ceiling glass salon, nothing like the place I picked my mum up. There were beautiful lilies on the table, and I thought, oh my God, it's just very intimidating. So I sat down, and they said, I said, I've come for an appointment. I have an appointment, and they said, fine. I waited, and what was amazing about the place was there was no music. But there was a mezzanine chaise lounge where women had their hands in sort of tiny little buckets and had feet in little buckets, not knowing that pedicures and manicures goes on there. And this guy comes along, the manager, Mr. Gordon, and he said, Leslie? So I said, yes. He said, follow me. So I went through the salon there, and it was great. And I suddenly I thought I saw a famous lady there called Shirley Bassey. But, when you go through the day, when you see these people on stage, they look the part. But when you see them sort of uncut, basically, I thought, oh, was that Shirley Bassey? Oh, okay. So I walked down the stairs, sat down, and the guy says to me, okay, he said, Leslie, what's your interest in hairdressing? So I said, first of all, can I just say my Aunt Gladys says hello to Mr. Vidal. So he's looking at me like I'm nuts. I thought that may get me through the door. And then he said, talking. So as I said, oh, by the way, I picked up my bag, put this wonky wooden bowl on the table. He said, you see the way, he thought I was nuts. I put it on the table. He just said to me, he just looked at it. And I said, you see the way I've shaped this bowl? This is the way I can shape women's hair. I will work for Sassoon and I'll be able to do it. And I just left it at that. I thought that would be the clinch. That with not only my Aunt Gladys saying hello to him, just the wooden bowl would be the turning key. And he looked at me and he'd sort of strange look, Didn't talk much after that. I don't know, where do you live, how far, whatever. Anyway, basically he just said to me, thank you very much indeed, we'll be in touch. When I walked out and saw all these guys and girls in the guys had light blue uniforms on, to the collar, like Beatle collarless uniforms. The guys were looking very chic in their lovely suits or tapered shirts, and was that going to be me? Walked out thinking, not sure. Walked down Bond Street, went home. Thought, no. This wooden bowl may have blown it, Leslie. You didn't give it a I'm glad it's going to sting it for you. And 2 weeks later, I get this phone call and said, right, we've had to think about it. We would like you to start in 2 weeks' time. I was like, okay. And I couldn't believe it. And that's how I walked into Vidal Sassoon on that wonderful day in 1963, I think it was.
I love it.
there it is. That was
That's
the entrance to the so-called world of fashion. Well, I
that.
didn't know at the time that he was the center of fashion. He was doing haircuts. He was got away from that whole bouffant, Dusty Springfield type of look, who actually, I've got a lot to thank Dusty Springfield for, but I'm talking about just the hair. He got away from that whole look, and he brought in this new, cutting by geometric and making the hair look so important and using the neckline of women. It's fantastic. I mean, didn't realize that this was a revolution going on in hairdressing, and it was great to be there from the beginning.
Oh yes, absolutely. And that's what I enjoyed reading in your book about what an art form that it was, that you were creating the hair to go around and to complement the natural features of your clients. And I found that fascinating, because usually people just take a picture in and say, I want this.
Well, that's one of the things that at Vidal's, believe it or not, many people walked in. You've got to remember the haircut and the Mary Quant short skirt look, that you got the two geometric looks together. And he used to do her hair. So women used to come in and bring in cut-out pictures from Vogue or Elle magazine or whatever magazine there was, and say, can I please look like that? And you've got to be very diplomatic, because you can't really say, look, madam, it's not going to suit you, or you're too ugly for that, or whatever. You can't say that. But what you've got to do is you've got to improvise with a haircut. So if somebody wants a short geometric haircut and they've got, I don't know, maybe their ears are not pulled together or whatever, you have to actually try to complement that haircut or improvise. If they insisted that they wanted it and it wouldn't look good on them, or they wanted a haircut, they wanted their hair done not having a Sassoon haircut, Mr. Sassoon said to us, if you're not happy with it, don't do it. Send them somewhere else. Which is amazing. Wow. And we used to, many times, I had to, the guy that got the sort of the leftovers from Sassoons must have made a fortune, because there were lots of people that wouldn't have it. The normal answer was, it's my money, I have what I like. In a way, that's true. But for Vidal to stipulate that was something very confident in him, and he made that with all his stylists. So everybody that walked out looked good. And I think that is a terrific way of doing things.
I love it. I think it's fascinating. So quite by accident, you get the opportunity to cut Jane Asher's hair, and that led to big things. So we would love to hear that story.
Yeah. So as I say, as you become this apprentice, you do a 3-year apprenticeship. And the whole idea is to work for someone for 3 months, 4 months, and you swap around. So you get used to every different style of every different hairdresser. So some are good at chignon, some are good at long hair, short hair, whatever. So you get your own ideas and see how you can knit it all together over a period. And this guy who I worked with, a guy called Roger Thompson, who was probably as good a hair cutter as Sassoons. In fact, he was artistic. He became artistic director of Sassoons in New York. And he's a fantastic hairdresser, but the slowest guy that you could ever wish to meet. And while I worked, because we would sometimes get in at 8 o'clock or 8:30, and we have clients every half an hour, he could take 45 minutes, sometimes took an hour. So clients built up, and it was a long wait. But a lot of the clients one of the clients he had was Jane Asher, which was his client. And I used to go and wash her hair, and she had very long, beautiful sort of red hair, very thick. So Roger used to just trim the ends, and I used to go and blow dry it, which would take about 30 minutes. And then when I'd finished, I would go over to him and I'd say, Mr. Roger, that Miss Asher is ready for you to look, and she's a bit of a hurry, so maybe you could just go over and just see if everything's okay, which he would do. And that's what I used to do. And I got used to, must wash the hair loads and loads of times. But this time I've now, done a year apprenticeship there. I've done 2 years apprenticeship. And while I was there, Jane, I become a stylist. I did it in 2.25 years instead of 3 years. So I've become sort of a so-called junior stylist. And when she came in without an appointment, the receptionist would come up to me and say, Leslie, can you do Jane's hair? Roger's a bit busy and she just wants it blow dried. So I said, yeah, that'd be fine. And that's what I did, but I got someone else to wash it. And then I started, if she wanted a little trim from her hair. And it happened 2 and 3. On the 4th occasion, she came in and the receptionist said, Leslie, Jane's not very happy. You know, she's Roger's client. Roger, again, hasn't got time to do her hair. She's not very happy with this. Would you do it? And I said, yeah. And it was a Saturday morning. It was about 11 o'clock, 11:30. We only used to work half a day. So I went through the whole procedure again. Somebody washed their hair. I started blow drying it, and I just trimmed her hair slightly. And I was finished, and I was going to football in the afternoon, which was in West London. And as I finished, I showed her the back mirror, which I'd done 2 or 3 times before over a period. She said to me, what are you doing this afternoon? And I thought for a second, I thought, what do you mean by that? And I said, why is that, Jane? And she said, and this is great. I must tell you something else. Whenever she came in, and one of the rules was we never talked about, we all knew that she was Paul McCartney's girlfriend, fiance. You never asked her about Paul McCartney, never asked her about the Beatles. She would talk about her films that she was doing. So, you never sort of invaded her privacy. Mm-hmm. So she suddenly said to me, have you got, I said, well, nothing. Why? What is it, Jane? She said, have you got time to cut my boyfriend's hair? I got time to cut your boyfriend's hair. Yes, I would. Let me think about this. Yes, of course. And she said, I said, what time? She said, what time suits you? And I pushed my luck, and the football game starts at 3 o'clock. It finishes at 5. And from West London, which is Shepherd's Bush, McCartney lives over in St John's Wood. I knew it would take me about 25 minutes. And I said, would 5:30, 6 o'clock be okay? Thinking that was much too late because she's asked me, just by 12 o'clock time. Uh-huh. And I thought if she says, well, that's too late, I would say, I'll come now, or you tell me when to come. And she just said, it's fine. So I said, oh, okay, lovely. Okay, great. I said, could you tell me where you live, please? I need to know the address. So she said, okay, she got some pen and paper out, and she wrote down 7 Cavendish Avenue.
Oh.
Jane, I said, that's my surname. And she said, well, maybe it was meant Leslie. I said, so I always look at sort of my lovely dear friend Roger Thompson is actually the Pete Best of hairdressing. So that was a lucky one. That's what happened. Have you got time to cut my boyfriend's hair? I love it.
That's great. That's great. So you cut Paul's hair that day, and then eventually you did it more often, and you established not really just a working relationship, but also a friendship that blossomed into a bigger job and more clients. So tell us about how that happened.
It did. Timing. It's all about timing. See, I cut Paul's hair on September 1966, and as you will give me the exact date and time in Candlestick when in August the Beatles played their last concert. So
right.
So if you think about it, I was round his house seeing him. 2 weeks later? From there, and from the time he was 50 in 1959, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, he's been a Beatle. Every day, Brian Epstein made sure they looked good. He was fantastic with him. The image looked good. He ironed out all the creases, and they have traveled everywhere. And every day they're a Beatle. They've got to get up, do interviews, got to do this, do that, make sure they all look, John, George, Paul and Ringo look okay. Now, when I've met him, he was unshaven. He was looking, he was wearing one of his tank tops, pair of jeans. It was great. He must have been absolutely great getting up one day, suddenly thinking, God, I really don't have to be a Beatle today. I could be Paul McCartney. So I could be who I like. So I caught him at the right time. So in between everything else, he was he had time, so he had time to be at home, and that's how my relationship came in. So I used to go around to his house, which is great because this would never have happened if he had come to the salon. So I used to cut his hair, and before I used to cut his hair, or even after, you know, I couldn't talk to Paul or any of the Beatles about football, which is soccer in the States,
Right.
which is something that I love to talk about, or sport generally. I never had that sort of conversation with him. So what do you ask? You ask, are you recording anything? Have you written anything at all? And you know, an artist would love to say yes. And he used to say to me, yes, I've done this. And what do you think of this? And, you know, then he played something like Oobla Da one day. Mm-hmm. And no one, I thought to myself when he played that, I said, oh, that doesn't sound like a Beatles song. Not even knowing it was Oobla Da, it was just the song. So I got a sort of first-hand little tweak of that. And we sort of just started chatting together. You know, Jane was away. And, you know, if I was there for a couple of hours, he'd play me something, or we'd have a little talk, have some tea, and muck about with his dog. I used to have a dog called Ernie. And if you look in my book, the book is dedicated to my rock and roll spaniel, Ernie. And Ernie used to come with me, and Ernie was having a great time with Martha. So the four of us had a great time.
That's awesome.
And it was right about that time that you literally reshaped Paul's appearance. You just picked up the scissors and changed history, didn't you?
Well, that was one of those situations where, again, the situation came about where, as I said, he had time on his side. He was unshaven at times when I saw him. There were little bits of a moustache there, which means you want to go 3-4 days without shaving, which is fine. And I hadn't seen Jane Asher in the salon. And I said to him, is Jane working? And he said, yes, she's in Bristol. She's a Shakespearean actress. And she was filming, I think, Midsummer's Night Dream, or doing the stage play. And I said, oh, are you going to go down and visit her? Because you've got time now. He said, I'd love to. He said, I can't do that because when I go there, it's all about the Beatles, what we're doing. We're going to record again. It's unfair on Jane. Right. And it's not fair. So no, the answer is I'll carry on just doing his hair. By the way, I'm doing his hair in his bathroom, in the bathroom mirror. So it's no sitting on a great throne with people around. It was just the mirror, a stool from the dressing table, and me and him talking to him in the mirror. And I said to him, oh, when she finishes, I suppose you're going to go on holiday with her. He said, no, again, another problem. And as I'm cutting his hair, and his hair is all being pushed back. So his hair is, picture it, off his forehead as I'm talking to him. And I said, what a shame. I said, that's really, what a pity. You've got time. You can't do this. And I just said, oh, I don't know. Why don't you go in disguise? No one, no one will know who you are. Meaning, dress up as a clown. I just don't know what I was saying. I just said, just go in disguise. I had no preempt of anything. And he just caught it and he just said, what do you mean? So I said, well, I don't know. And while his hair was back, I said, well, why don't you have all your hair cut off? Said it as a joke-y type of thing. And he looked at me and said, well, go on then, do it. I said, what, just cut all your hair off? And he said, yeah, do it. Just do it. And I said, okay, I'll do it. So I started cutting it from the back. So, his hair was a bit longer than a Beatle look. It was just beginning, it was over the ears. It was just getting that look, which is actually a nice look, but it was a good look. It wasn't too neat looking, which is what I like. And so I started cutting it from the back. And no one really, if you're doing your hair, you don't really want to start from the front because it's too much of a shock. You work your way round. So I was working my way round, and suddenly I come to the ears, and you can't hide that. So I went right down the side of his ear, so his earlobe was showing, or even a bit more. And then I started cutting into it from the front and thinning it out and messing it about. So it was pretty short compared to what the Beatle look was. And I thought, my God, Leslie, what have you done? This is like, what have you done? And the weird thought was, just a little mad thought in my head was, what about if Brian Epstein gets an offer for $100 million for the Beatles to appear next week in Shea Stadium or somewhere? He's going to have to say, oh my God, who's cut your hair? What have you done? You know, it would be one of those situations. It was just a mad thought. And when I finished it, he didn't sort of go, oh, he didn't do anything. He was just, okay, no, that's fine. I left there. We went downstairs, had our normal cup of tea and whatever. And I left and I thought, oh my, I went home and I thought, that's it now. You've had your fun. You've cut the Beatles' hair a few times. You're not going to get called back for this one, you know. And didn't think of anything more. 5 weeks later, in the newspapers, there was a great big article. In fact, there was many articles of Paul McCartney, Jane Asher, and Mal Evans coming back from Nairobi, Kenya, on a safari with girls and asking him getting away with it completely, no one knowing who he was, until he came back, obviously, and the press started saying, you know, who cut? Basically, how did you get your hair cut? You know, who cut your hair off? And I probably would thank Mal Evans for saying, well, actually, it was Leslie, you know, who's Leslie, you know, and that's how it all came about. And it was a haircut that sort of moved on very quickly because they were recording Sergeant Pepper. So he had his short hair there and Lennon had his short hair. And it all sort of fitted together. And that was a great haircut. The press article said, the man Leslie the barber who made Paul a skinhead. Now I've got a couple of articles of that. Yeah, I've literally got the headline: the man that made Paul a skinhead. And if you look at those pictures, if you think about it, you wouldn't know that was Paul McCartney. People would know now because we've all seen what they look like. But at the time, you thinking it's the cute one. That's not the cute one. That's a skinhead.
Well, you definitely defined that signature look of their last years together because, you know, once Paul does it, then everybody else wants to transition, you know, into that look.
Yeah, exactly. It's a dedicated followers of fashion, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh, we are. Now, one of the stories that I love most in your book is the way that you showed the personality of each Beatle in the way they reacted to your styling their hair. And it said so much about who they were. Tell everybody what they were doing when you were cutting their hair, because it really conveys each Beatle's personality.
Okay, so Paul, as I said, we've been through the Paul thing, and that was all okay. No questions asked. All the time I ever cut the Beatles' hair, or with them or doing it, not one person ever said to me, they never had a stylist around them. There was no one saying, no management ever came and said, well, you know, the Beatles look like this. And I think that when, you know, obviously when Epstein was around, he formed that look, which I think is great. You know, he got them into the Chelsea boots, the suits, different suits. They look good. When as I say, I reached the stage with them. It's when they hung up their guitars in Elton Park is when I thought that's when they took their ties off. They were loose. So they all became different. So when I used to cut George Harrison's hair, George had fabulous hair, and George, Ringo, and John lived in the countryside in Virginia Water and Weybridge, which is about an hour's drive if you're lucky in the traffic. And then you have McCartney, even in the traffic, would take him 10 minutes, 15 minutes the most from his house to the offices, Apple offices. So when George used to come out into town, I used to do his hair. I'm moving the story on a bit. They opened up a hairdressing salon for me in the King's Road as part of the Apple empire, as it was being formed at the time. And before he went up to the offices, he would come into the salon and he would it was like meditation. It's, you know, to have your hair washed and blow dried and music on is actually very therapeutic. It's very nice. It's relaxing. You can think, you can do what you like. You just close your eyes. And George was like that. He was to come in. His chauffeur would ring me and say, George is on his way. It's okay, that's fine. And he'd come in. I'd put some music on. We'd have a little chat. Again, I used to talk to him. Not too much. He was one of those people you sort of knew when to talk to because he was a bit deep in his own thoughts. But I did ask him a few times, also again, as a bit of a music groupie, what are you doing? He said, oh, I'm learning this. This guy, Ravi Shankar, plays the sitar. I'm learning the sitar or playing the sitar, which is never part of my orchestra at the time. But I thought, oh, okay, great, little thing. Then we put some music on, and he would just sort of just drift off. I would half an hour, 45 minutes later, his hair would look, say, George, it's all done for you. And he'd shake his head, because he had long hair. And he was fine. And he was very sort of, I didn't know what was going in his head at the time. I wish I'd knew at the time, because what I know now, I would have had much conversations with him. But he was a bit more than he gave away. He didn't give away much, but there's a lot going on in that head of his. He was good, and he was very peaceful, literally, to be around. There was no sort of hypertension. Not like with John Lennon. That was like the Headmaster coming in. When they used to go into Apple, if you can picture this, you've got the office workers there, and Paul would come in, and Paul was Paul. He'd bounce in, say hello to everybody, and everyone would put people at ease. Ringo would do the same, he'd come in, morning, whatever. And George would float through. And then when Lennon came in, it's like the Headmaster. It was like, you'll sit up in your chair, sit back straight, what mood's he going to be in today? And that was what the impression I got when I used to see him go in there, and what people told me. And, obviously he could be like a roller coaster, 1 minute up, 1 minute down. I used to see him when I used to go up to Apple. Derek Taylor, who was sort of, if you wanted to have any meetings with any of the Beatles, press or whatever, he was really like a fifth Beatle, Derek Taylor. And he was fantastic to me because I used to cut his hair, and he put me onto loads of the clients at Apple, with Peter Asher as well, obviously James' brother, was it our guy there. And I would get loads of clients there, not knowing who they were. One could be this long-haired guy who has been recording at Trident Studios, walking around like phased and in another world. And Peter Asher said to me, can you just trim his hair? We've got a new album coming out for him. And was trimming his head, and he cut it. Asked him what his name was. He said, oh, my name's James Taylor. Fine, is he going to make it? You never knew if they were going to make it or not, because one of the guys who I came quite friendly with, who was fantastic, and he had Eric Clapton on guitar, I think he had Ringo, Paul, whatever, a guy called Jackie Lomax. And he did a song, he said, I've got this song, Sour Milk Sea, what I wrote with George Harrison. It had to be a hit. There's no way that song would not be a hit with everything that went around it. It was a flop. So, he didn't make it, unfortunately. So you never knew who was around. One day, when I was there, John Lennon comes running up the stairs, always running, and Derek's, he's very observant. He must have said hello to Derek. Derek may have said to him, what we're doing today. And he just said, who's he? He said, oh, that's Leslie. He cuts Paul's hair. He said, well, send him in and cut mine. Exactly what he said. And Derek said, John wants you to go into the boardroom there and do his hair. So I said, does he? Okay. I walked in there. Now, you would think, quite a few thoughts went through my head. Number one, why am I going into the boardroom? Right, on his own. Number two is I walk into the boardroom and there's a journalist there, and they were talking about music, and I was just sort of trimming his hair a bit. I'm thinking, well, why would someone do that while they're answering questions? Anyway, that was the first time. And on the second time, the same scenario, except there was a very small lady there dressed all in black, and he was sitting on a swivel chair, and he was looking down. This person was quite small, sitting on a chair there, and I was trying to do his hair. It was never, hi, Leslie, how are you today? I would say, hi, John, how are you? It's like, oh, fine. Like I wasn't there. It was like, but, I was there to do his hair. He wanted it done. I don't know why. And I started just trimming his hair, and he kept moving it forward, which is really annoying. If you cut people's hair, you've got to be, you could really chop into someone's hair. And all I heard was, I don't understand what you're talking about to this person. And I'm thinking, that's strange. You know, my ears are, you know, wide open now. And I'm thinking, well, why is he saying that if she's a journalist asking about music? And he doesn't understand what she's talking about, unless he doesn't understand it. And she kept going on saying, I don't know what you mean. Explain to me more. And this person was explaining whatever she was trying to explain, which I later found out was this art at her exhibition at the gallery at the gallery in London, and it was Yoko Ono. It was the first time, and I didn't know that. And I stayed around for a little bit longer than normal because I was fascinated by it. I've suddenly been there long enough to trim just what it was. She didn't say anything. He never acknowledged me. I left. I think if I said goodbye, he never said goodbye. He just left. I could have just very strange. So there you go. That was John Lennon situation. I did have a couple of years later. We did have a funny. See, people talk about Lennon and they can have a bad experience with him, which is fine. I can understand that, and people can talk about it. I don't like it when people give opinions about him who've never met him. I know that's a bit unfair to say. You can get his character. But if you haven't met him, you've got to be careful what other people say about people, you know, what their reason is saying it. So, you know, I was in a situation where I got conned, or cleverly conned, by a journalist who took me out for coffee and a music paper. She happened to be a client of mine as well, and said, can I ask you about the Beatles' hair? Which is, why not? We're not going to talk about anything else. And she was clever, and she said to me, Leslie, I'd just like to know the texture of the Beatles' hair. And I said, yeah. He said, what's Paul's hair like? I said, Paul's got really good hair. You can maneuver it around. And Ringo's? I said, Ringo's got great hair. You know, you've got to give Maureen a lot of credit there, because his wife was a hairdresser. I said, yeah, he's got thick hair. You can play around with it. And she said, and George? I said, George has got luscious hair. You know, it's great. You can move that around. I was just going through a whole hairdressing talk, actually. And she said, and Lennon's hair? I said, yeah, it's good. It's all right. So she went, so you mean it's just all right? So I said, well, yeah. She said, is it? So I take it it's not as thick as the other hair. I said, well, no, it's not. The texture is not, you know, I got too technical again. I said, the texture is not as thick as, you know, the other three, but it's okay. So she said, no, just okay. Yeah. And then she said, well, why don't we just jump ahead 20 years later? Do you think he would lose his hair first out of all the Beatles? And I said, well, possibly, you know, I don't know, but possibly. He said, well, think about it. If he's got the thinnest hair of the three other Beatles, he would probably lose his hair more than the others, like an idiot. I said, well, I suppose if that did happen, I suppose, yes, he would. But then she just dropped that, and we carried on talking about whatever. 4 days later, Derek Taylor, this is the Beatles press officer, right? He calls you in the evening, 8, 9 o'clock at night. It's not, hello, Leslie, how are you?
Right.
Leslie, what have you said? And I said, I've said what? He said, you've said John Lennon's going bald. And I said, no, I haven't. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, it's on the newspapers and it's coming out on Friday on the music papers. And the headline is John Lennon's going bald, says Leslie, that says John's hairdresser. And it's been advertised on the radio, pirate radio station at the time, you know, buy this magazine, read about why John Lennon's going bald. I actually heard it. I thought, oh, God, this is it. This is the John Lennon where you've got the headmaster's going to give me the cane or something. And at the salon there, I knew it was on that morning, and I knew the phone was going to ring. I knew it. And the phone rang, and it was John Lennon. And he said to me, Leslie, and as he said my name, I went into this whole thing. I said, John, I said, I really didn't say anything. I said, she's taken me, and I ended up saying, she took me out of context. You've got to believe. And with that, he said, shut the bleep up. Don't talk to me about being taken out of context. Look what they did to me. Said we were bigger than Jesus Christ. Right. He laughed. So, and I went, oh, he's just understood it totally. It was a little pause. Then he said to me, Leslie, I want to ask you something. I said, what's that? He said, am I really going beep, beep, bald? No, he said, well, come over now. If there's anything on the floor, I want you to stick it together again. And we put the phone down. And I got on the cab, went over to Savile Row, walked in, went upstairs, and had a chat with him. He was with Yoko by this time. They were ish together. And I did again say to him, look, meanwhile, I got the newspaper there. He's got the newspaper there. And I said, no. He said, I'm not going bald, am I? I said, no, I'm not going bald. And then I said to him, but John, let me just cut the ends, because if you keep letting it grow and they get split, they will break off eventually. And he went, yes, you're absolutely right, absolutely right. I thought, oh, right, I've got through to him. Bloody 6 months later, he's ended up in Amsterdam on the hairpiece thing. So there you go. But he was funny. And what I liked about it was his humor was there. And I saw his humor to it. He could have really lashed out. You tell a pop star, a music star, an icon, that he's going to go bald, right? You could take it the other way. And he didn't. So thank you, John.
You also saw his insecurity, because beneath that, what he cut to the chase was not someone has, bashed me, but oh my gosh, am I going bald? And that's John, always, fearful, always worried about the worst. So you really, that's a great story. I absolutely love it. Well, you were in on two of the biggest events of the 1960s, especially of the psychedelic era. One, the rooftop concert, which you knew about. You didn't actually go up there, but you were privy to it before it happened. And the other, which is the one we really want to talk about, is your time on the magical mystery bus. I mean, just a few people were selected to be part of that, and you were one of those with our good friend Frida Kelly, and there are so many great people. Tell us what it was like to go on that excursion.
Quite mind-blowing, actually. I'll tell you why. Because, yes, I cut the Beatles' hair individually. I never had a chance. I did see them in concert when I was actually 15 years old, which is a story I could tell you another time. But I did see them live. But for me to experience, to be on a coach, there were 43 people on that coach. So you take away 4 Beatles, and you suddenly think, my God, how am I going to, this is going to be amazing to watch how 4 people, these guys work together. One of the strange things about it is that at the time, when I was at Paul's house, and he did say to me, it was quite strange. It was a bit surreal, because when I was over at Paul's house, and he did ask me, just 3 weeks before, Brian Epstein passed away. So I thought it would have been a period of mourning, and anything they had, or forthcoming events they would have, they would postpone or put on hold till later on, till they're ready. But no, the show must go on. And he said, we're going away on down to south of England. There's some fan club members and a few people. We've got actors. We've got that one going. Would you like to come along, be a passenger, and you can also do our hair at the same time? I said, oh, I'd love to do that. So I couldn't believe it, actually. I thought, oh my God, this would be great. It's 7 days with the Beatles. How nice is that? And so I met them at, as I say, Paul lived in London, still does, and the others lived down the countryside. So we arranged to meet at a place called Allsop Place, which is by Madame Tussauds, again near Baker Street. I got there early and saw quite a few people dressed up in different uniforms. Ivor Cutler as Mr. Bloodvessel. I didn't even know he was Mr. Blood. He was sitting on the floor with Paul McCartney, leaning on the rails. One of the strange things is that it was about 8:30 in the morning. If you can imagine, it wasn't the best of days, but people going to the office and they were walking by, and you can imagine, people going, "Is that Paul McCartney on the floor?" No, it can't be. Oh my God, it is Paul McCartney on the floor. And so it was fun watching that, because I hadn't experienced fan adulation at all. I haven't seen that. I just hadn't seen that. Heard about it, saw it, didn't see much of it at the concert I went to in the early days. But I'd heard about it. And when the odd person did stop and say, "You are Paul McCartney," he would sign the autograph. He was very good at that. We waited and waited, and the coach hadn't turned up. And Paul had arranged with Mail to find out what's going on. Typical thing is the coach hadn't been painted. There'd still be Magical Mystery Tours painted on the side, hadn't been finished yet. So we went over, and opposite there was a cafe there where the transport drivers, train drivers would go after their shift. And Paul and myself just went over and had a cup of tea. It was quite amazing. Just the two of us went over. I don't know how it came about. We walked in, and all these guys from their night shift, or day, whatever it was, were drinking their tea and having their breakfast. And then comes Paul McCartney. And we sit down, we have a cup of tea. The newspapers followed us. There's a big picture of me with Paul McCartney sitting down having a cup of tea with him. It was all a bit surreal. Then we get on the coach, finally turns up, pick up the other three. And I'm still thinking, Brian Epstein's died 2-3 weeks ago. They get on the coach. It was fun. And what was fun about it, you saw Ringo sat next to Aunt Jess in the front seat. And that seemed to be the only script that was sort of improvised, but they knew what they were doing, so shouting and screaming at one another. That was really what that was all about. It was quite funny. The other two, John and George, sat next to each other for quite mostly sat next to each other during the course of the journey, and consequent in other days as well. Paul was I call Paul McCartney the conductor of the Beatles. He was with the director working out what they're going to do, where we're going to go. And they were just heading into a direction where it was slightly improvised, but, I'll give you an example. There's a place, they were going to Whitcomb, which is a Whitcomb Fair, and trying to go over the bridge. Well, no one sussed that the coach was too big to go. He got stuck. He actually got stuck. So they had to reverse the coach. They never did go to the fair. So they had to reverse, and it was fun. And it was all being filmed at the same time, and everything was being filmed. Lennon went nuts. He jumped out, and I didn't see him kick the side of the coach, but I did understand that he didn't like the idea of this not being organised. I never saw while I was on the coach, John or George really take any give any direction on what was going on. It was all directed by Paul, what was going on. They did their own thing, obviously, when we got out the coach, because they were doing different scenes altogether and dressing up. Paul dressed up as an army man, and we stopped off in the middle of a field, and there was a tent there, and supposedly we were all supposed to crawl under this tent and end up the next scene, which was shot somewhere else. You look round, there's George Harrison in an oversized blue jacket, cross-legged in the middle of a field. It was surreal things and it was fascinating to watch all this. And then when you get down to Cornwall, you get down to Torquay, where we ended up, people did come up to them and ask, and they were terrific. I've got to say, they did not act like prima donnas. They acted I was surprised. Was I surprised or not surprised? I don't know. They weren't the type of people who 3 years before were pulling their hair out and throwing jelly beans at them. They were quite polite. I just said, "Can we have your autographs? We love you." Kept hearing, everyone loved each other. Everyone loved George, everyone loved Ringo, everyone this, that, and the other. But it was fun, and it was really great to see, and felt quite privileged, that just watched this evolve. So it was quite an amazing story. And lots of nice stories happened down there as well.
Yeah, your book is full of stories that people have never heard before. And, so many people in the Beatles world have read everything. And, as I said earlier, I really thought, oh, no, please don't let this be the same stories I've heard 1,000 times. And it certainly is not. So if you had to, we want to save a bunch of the stories for people to read in the book. And again, the title of the book is The Cutting Edge, Leslie Cavendish. It's on Amazon, wherever fine books are sold. But Leslie, if you had to give a teaser to people of something that we haven't discussed, but they definitely need to read in the book, what would you say?
Well, let's put it this way. There's a nice little story that happened where Ringo hurt his thumb playing a one-string ukulele at 11:30 at night after we've had quite a few pints. And Paul sitting playing a piano at all workingmen, fishermen late at night. I was there, and it's a very funny story because, again, how did this happen? Everything was just improvised. It was a story that said, and then that was a nice little story. And then there's lots of little stories. There's one great story there as a teaser. I heard you mention the Grateful Dead before when your intro. The Hell's Angels story is a bit of a spine chiller, which is the George Harrison invite from Haight-Ashbury to come to London. And no one asked, he didn't mention to them to come and stay at Leslie's, his hairdresser's flat, did he? No one told me that.
Did they want you to cut their hair?
Well, they were. Let's just put it this way: the guy that was with them, I will tell this story. I won't tell what happened with the Hells Angels, but one of the guys there was two guys that came with him. One was Ken Kesey who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The other one was the Grateful Dead's manager, and the other one was a long-haired blonde guy, and I didn't know who he was, and I was I had my friend at the time, a lady called Miss Odell, Chris Odell, who's one of my best friends. And this guy said, "Oh, you cut the Beatles' hair?" Or one of the guys said there. I said, "Yes." And said, "Oh, would you?" I looked at this guy's hair, and he said, "Oh, can you just trim my hair?" So it was only a tiny bit to cut. I was very nervous, by the way. I'm not going to tell you why I was nervous. And I said, "Okay." And I just said to him, I said, "Are you a musician? And what do you do?" He said, "So I'm a musician." I said, "Oh, really good." I said, do you play for anybody that I would know?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "The Dead, the Grateful Dead." And I said, "Oh, great." I said, "You know what? Jerry Garcia is one of my favorite guitarists. He writes lyrics. No one writes songs better than him. What do you do?" He said, "I write the songs for Jerry Garcia." And I said,
wow.
I said, oh. And I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Bob Weir." And I went, "Oh my God." Sorry about that. I did check him out. That it's a bit like someone coming from space, meeting Lennon, someone saying he's from the Beatles, and then they say, "Oh yeah, McCartney writes the best songs I've ever done. What do you do?" He said, "Actually, I write them with him." So that was a funny little story that happened. So more stories in that book. That was a taster.
It's great, really great.
We love it. We just love it. So most importantly, Leslie, where can people find your book, and can they follow you on any social media?
Yeah, I don't do that. You can follow me on Facebook and my name, and they can go on my website, which is also some nice photos and little stories there on www.beatleshairdresser.com. And you can get my book from www.beatlesbookstore.com, or you can message me. I have some books here that I can personally sign for you. So yeah, or you can get it on Amazon. You can get it if anyone out there speaks Spanish. You can get a Spanish version of it, which is nice. And yeah, there's plenty of ways you can get it. But Beatles Bookstore is a good one. And contact me, and I will always be happy to answer any questions. Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm happy that people still are interested in the Beatles, and it's an ongoing thing. It's brilliant. So
yeah, you really did write a great book. It's so enjoyable, and I found myself just so excited to just keep reading it. My time to read is very, very small, and so I just hated every time to put it down, because the stories make you smile, just make you smile. So go to BeatlesHairdresser.com and Beatles Bookstore. So and Leslie is also on Facebook. But very sadly, Leslie, we are out of time for today, but we thank you for staying up so late in the UK to be with us tonight and for sharing your riveting stories about swinging London and the Beatles and your life. There's so much more about your life in the book too, and it's fascinating. It's a terrific story. So Jude and I are hopeful that we can meet you face to face at the next.
Look forward to it. Yeah, thank you very much indeed for the invite to Jude and to you, Lena. And thank you so much. It's been very enjoyable. Loved it.
We've loved it. Just loved it. Let me ask you one quick question before you go. Sure. Do you still have the bowl?
No.
Oh, no.
No, what a shame. I haven't got the bowl, but you know that bowl has me. Somewhere
that's true.
That bowl said, I was a nothing before, Leslie.
Oh, well, I thought I would have it under a glass dome because
it should be in the Beatles Museum somewhere. I don't know.
Really? No joke, really. Well, thank you, Leslie. Thank you for sharing your time with us. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you indeed, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
And thank all of you for tuning in and turning on tonight. The clock is ticking away, so we're going to have to drop out now, but not before we remind you to keep watching Facebook, Twitter, and the John Lennon Series website, Nudge, Nudge, Wink, Wink, for a big announcement any day now about the release of Volume 5, Shades of Life.
And check out my hot off the press chapbook on those smooth, mellow years of the 1970s, the age of yacht rock, as they called it, at lenastag.com. It's an abridged preview of my 70s cookbook, which will be full of recipes and information about the 70s. So take a peek at it. I think you'll enjoy it. And in June, join us on She Said, She Said as we host one of our famous hashtag eye candy shows, when we welcome a lady who is not only gorgeous, but interesting, innovative, and always in style. John's best friend from Liverpool College of Art, the one and only Helen Anderson. Not only was Helen John's constant companion during his college days and a friend of Stu Sutcliffe's as well, but in the 1970s, she went on to become the costume designer for the TV show Dallas. And she has so many amazing stories to tell, and it's all coming up in June on She Said, She Said. Then in July, historian and author, our beloved friend Al Sussman, will get down to the nitty-gritty and give us all of the griff, as they say in Liverpool, about what was really going on with Apple, the Beatles, Alan Klein, the Let It Be project, and all during the psychedelic Beatles era. So no one knows the truth and details the way Al does. He is mesmerizing. So we can't wait for you to hear what he has to share with us. And until then, here's to food for thought, food for the soul, and food for the love of rock and roll.
Ta-ra and shine on.